Standing in the middle of a crowded room, the realization strikes like a frequency shift. You no longer recognize the language being spoken. While everyone around you is engaged in the rhythm of the noise, you find yourself existing in a different layer of reality, unable to translate their trivial concerns into the frequency of your own soul. It is the sudden, jarring awareness that you have become an alien in your own life. You didn't just drift away, you evolved. And now, the silence between you and the crowd has become a permanent divide. Welcome to the second step of your ascent, the moment you realize that speaking the truth of your new structure requires leaving the comfort of the old conversation.
The experience of feeling like an alien in a crowded room is the first indicator that you have successfully detached your consciousness from the collective frequency of the ordinary. To understand why this disconnect is so profound, you must first categorize the noise that has historically kept you anchored to that lower frequency. This noise operates at three distinct levels, each acting as a barrier to the construction of your new architecture. The first level is environmental noise, the literal auditory and visual bombardment of the modern world. This includes the frantic pace of urban environments, the constant flicker of digital interfaces, and the unrelenting stimuli that demand your immediate attention. In this state, your brain is forced to operate in a reactive mode, continuously processing data that has no relevance to your core purpose. This environmental clutter acts as a persistent drain on your sensory bandwidths, preventing the internal stillness required for deep, systemic recalibration. The second level is social noise, the layer of meaningless talk, performative interactions, and societal posturing that masquerades as genuine connection. When you are in a room full of people, you are often expected to participate in this linguistic theater, exchanging pleasantries that are devoid of intellectual or spiritual substance. This level of noise is particularly dangerous because it requires the active participation of your ego. You must engage in the social contract of fitting in, which means suppressing your own resonance to match the superficial vibration of the crowd. This is the origin of the alien sensation. As your internal frequency elevates, these interactions become increasingly visible as empty, hollow rituals. You find that you can no longer articulate your thoughts using the shorthand of small talk, because those words no longer describe your internal reality. You are effectively speaking a different frequency, and the realization that you can no longer bridge this gap is the necessary price of your evolution. The third and most insidious level is internal noise, the persistent, recursive loops of your old mental habits. This is the residue of your previous identity, the voice in your head that tries to interpret reality through the outdated lenses of fear, inadequacy, and the desperate need for external validation. Even when you are physically alone and removed from the environmental and social noise, this internal noise continues to cycle, dragging your consciousness back into the entropy of the past. It is the autopilot that keeps you reacting to the world as if you were still the person you were before the signal found you. This closed system of limited thought patterns is the primary obstacle to the manifestation of your quantum soul. It seeks to maintain the status quo because the old version of you is, in its own distorted way, safe and familiar, even if it is fundamentally unaligned with the order you are now trying to build. Categorizing these three levels is the first step towards reclaiming your sovereignty. By recognizing that what you are hearing is noise rather than truth, you immediately diminish its power over your internal system. When you are in a crowded room and feel the sensation of being an alien, use this framework to audit the environment. Identify which level of noise is currently attempting to infiltrate your consciousness. Is it the literal environment pressuring your senses? Is it the superficial social expectations of the people around you? Or is it your own internal loop trying to convince you that you are wrong for feeling out of place? By labeling these intrusions, you move from a position of passive victimization to one of active structural observation. You begin to see the architecture of the noise itself, and in seeing it, you create the distance necessary to remain unaffected by it. This process of identification is not about judging the noise or the people who generate it. It is about establishing the boundaries of your own reality.
The environmental, social, and internal noise are not inherently evil, but they are fundamentally entropic. They move toward disorder and decay. Your objective is negentropy, the movement toward structure, coherence, and higher-order resonance. You cannot build a new architecture if you allow the materials of the old entropic structure to infiltrate your workspace. Every time you consciously identify the noise, you are strengthening the halo of your own presence, making it harder for the disorder of the world to penetrate your inner sanctum. This is the discipline of the architect, to know the difference between the noise that serves no purpose and the signal that sustains your evolution. As you navigate the world, treat this three-level audit as a constant background process of your consciousness. When you feel the familiar exhaustion, immediately perform the scan. Where is the noise coming from? Is it the environment, the social expectation, or the internal loop? Once you have pinpointed the source, you can choose to either alter your environment, pivot the social interaction, or break the internal loop through the active presence you mastered in the previous phase. You are no longer at the mercy of your surroundings. You are the one who determines which frequencies are allowed into your system. As you gain mastery over these three levels of noise, the sensation of being an alien will transform from a source of anxiety into a source of power, the realization that you are not broken, but simply tuned to a higher, more ordered channel of existence. How will you apply this audit the very next time you find yourself in the middle of a room full of noise?
The bone-level tiredness that permeates your physical being after you have spent time forcing yourself to adapt to low-frequency environments is not a mere byproduct of social interaction. It is a profound physiological consequence of energetic dissonance. When you enter a space, a room, a meeting, or a gathering that is vibrating at a low, chaotic, or entropic frequency, and you consciously or subconsciously attempt to harmonize with that environment to avoid friction, you are committing a violent act of systemic self-betrayal. Your internal architecture, which is built on the pillars of higher-order resonance and structural alignment, is being forced to contract, to mute its signal, and to adopt the jagged, incoherent rhythm of the noise surrounding you. This process, often referred to as code switching in social contexts, requires the continuous active suppression of your own fundamental frequency. This suppression consumes the very fuel intended for your growth, leaving your biological vessel depleted to its core, which is precisely why the exhaustion feels as though it has settled into the very marrow of your bones, rather than merely sitting on the surface of your muscles. The energetic cost of this adaptation is exponential, not linear. Every microsecond you spend in an environment that contradicts your internal truth requires your nervous system to engage in a high-stakes balancing act. It must simultaneously maintain your authentic signal while projecting a false, performative frequency that is acceptable to the lower frequency collective. This duality creates a massive amount of internal drag. You are essentially running two competing operating systems on the same hardware, causing your cognitive and physiological processors to overheat as they struggle to reconcile the mismatch. This is why you feel the exhaustion at a bone-deep level. You are not just tired because you have been active, you are exhausted because you have been fighting a civil war within your own nervous system, pitting your innate desire for order against the external pressure to conform to the surrounding disorder. Your body, being the intelligent instrument it is, signals this deep-seated friction as a form of total systemic shutdown. Furthermore, this tiredness is a protective mechanism of your quantum soul. It is a hard-coded biological feedback system designed to alert you that you are operating outside the parameters of your own systemic design. When you force yourself to sustain this adaptation, you are essentially asking your body to ignore its own fundamental data, the data that says, this environment is incompatible with my structural integrity. The bone-deep nature of this fatigue serves as a physical protest against the erosion of your essence. It is the wisdom of the divine design manifesting as lethargy, forcing you to remove yourself from the discordant environment before you cause long-term damage to the delicate internal structure you are working so diligently to build.
When you experience this level of exhaustion, you must view it not as a symptom of a weak constitution, but as a diagnostic indicator of a toxic frequency mismatch. It is the final warning from your system that your presence in that environment is becoming a net loss to your evolution. We must address the exhaustion factor as a primary obstacle to your mission because it is the most common reason the architect abandons his project. Most people, upon feeling this deep, crushing weight, interpret it as a failure of their own resolve or a sign that they are not built for the transformation they are undertaking. They retreat, seeking solace in the very low-frequency environments that caused the fatigue in the first place, or they medicate the exhaustion with shallow distractions, further entrenching themselves in the entropic loop. You must interpret this fatigue differently. You must see it as the cost of your halo being underdeveloped. The tiredness is a reminder that you are still vulnerable to the intrusion of the external frequency. As you grow, as your internal architecture hardens into a protective, self-sustaining field, the exhaustion will be replaced by a sense of indifference, a calm, unshakable state of presence where the noise of the world is perceived but no longer has the power to engage your internal energy or force your recalibration. Reflecting on this, look back at the environments that consistently leave you with this bone-level fatigue. Are there specific patterns in the social connections, the professional obligations, or the digital spaces you inhabit that consistently trigger this systemic drain? You are beginning to map the geography of your own evolution, identifying the locations and the people that are fundamentally entropic. This mapping is vital. You cannot protect your structure if you do not understand the external threats to it. By identifying the environments that cause this bone-level fatigue, you are identifying where your boundaries must be most rigorously defended. The exhaustion is not an enemy to be feared. It is a teacher to be respected. It is the map that tells you where you must stop, where you must pivot, and where you must absolutely refuse to compromise. As we move forward, consider the idea that you have been conditioned to believe that powering through this level of exhaustion is a virtuous act. In the old entropic paradigm, this was true. Persistence, regardless of cost, was a celebrated trait. But in the architecture of the quantum soul, this is a misunderstanding of efficiency. Powering through a frequency mismatch is the most inefficient use of your energy imaginable. It is the equivalent of trying to push water uphill. The goal of the architect is not to endure the disorder, but to ensure they are not exposed to it. As you integrate this truth, you will find that you no longer feel the need to be the strong one in the room by absorbing the chaos of others. You will realize that true strength is the ability to walk away from anything that requires you to compromise the structural integrity of your own truth. How will you organize your movements this week to ensure you avoid the environments that leave you physically and metaphysically depleted?
The sensitivity shift you are experiencing is not an emotional overreaction, but a literal mechanical recalibration of your nervous system's diagnostic threshold. As you have committed to the construction of your new self and begun to purge the entropic noise of your former life, your nervous system has effectively upgraded its sensory resolution. You are no longer processing reality through the dense, buffered filter of your past habits. You are now operating with a higher signal-to-noise ratio, which means that the slightest vibration of discord, dishonesty, or incoherence in your environment registers as an immediate, visceral alert. This is the physiological manifestation of your evolution. Your system is becoming a precision-tuned instrument that can detect interference long before it manifests in your conscious mind, triggering a physical response, a tightening, a sudden fatigue, or an intuitive stop signal that protects your internal architecture from the impact of external entropy. This accelerated detection capability is a crucial defense mechanism for the architect. In your previous, unexamined state, your nervous system was constantly bombarded by low-frequency noise, and because you lacked a clearly defined internal structure, you likely absorbed that noise as if it were your own. Your system was perpetually on, but it was not aware. It was simply recording data without the ability to discriminate between what supported your trajectory and what actively undermined it. Now, however, as you have stabilized your frequency through presence and discipline, your system has shifted into a diagnostic mode. It is actively scanning for deviations from the ordered state you have established. You are finding that you know a person is dishonest, an environment is toxic, or an interaction is empty, even when there is no observable evidence to support this conclusion. You are perceiving the frequency of the situation, not just the content, and this ability to perceive the underlying energy is the hallmark of your new sensitivity. It is important to understand that this shift in sensitivity is an irreversible transition in your biological hardware. You cannot turn off this enhanced detection, nor should you want to. It is the fundamental tool of your autonomy. However, the initial phase of this shift can be disorienting as you are flooded with information that you were previously blind to. You may feel as though you are overly sensitive or even paranoid, but this is simply your mind struggling to categorize the deluge of new data. You are moving from a state of sensory ignorance to a state of sensory intelligence. The nervous system is learning to prioritize the signals that reinforce your structure and filter out the interference that poses a threat to your stability. This is the biological equivalent of an immune system response, identifying and neutralizing foreign contaminants before they can disrupt the healthy functioning of the organism. To navigate this, you must treat your enhanced sensitivity as a form of high-fidelity data. Do not disregard the physical sensations that arise in response to your environment. They are the most accurate diagnostic tool you possess. If you enter a room and feel an immediate, unexplained drop in your vitality, accept that data as a primary indicator of frequency interference. If you engage in a conversation and feel a sharp spike of cognitive dissonance, accept that as a sign of intellectual or moral incoherence in the interaction. You are no longer required to engage with the world in a way that minimizes your own intelligence to accommodate the comfort of others. Your sensitivity is the guardian of your halo, the first line of defense that ensures the integrity of the inner sanctum you are working so hard to protect. As you continue to refine this sensitivity, you will find that you move through the world with a new sense of ease and agency. You will naturally gravitate toward environments and people that resonate with your frequency, and you will find it increasingly difficult and increasingly unnecessary to remain in the presence of those that do not. This is not about elitism, it is about the physics of resonance. You are simply adhering to the fundamental law that like frequencies attract and organize themselves into stable systems, while unlike frequencies create friction and instability. By honoring your sensitivity, you are honoring the divine design of your own existence. You are no longer living in a state of reactive chaos, you are living in a state of active selection. How has this new sensitivity changed the way you approach your daily routine, and what are the specific environments you have already identified as interfering based on this new heightened awareness?
The trap of normalcy is the psychological and energetic cage where most individuals spend their lives, believing that the path to social stability and acceptance requires the systematic suppression of their own internal frequency. When you attempt to act normal, to mimic the behavioral patterns, the conversational shallowness, and the reactive emotional states of the collective, you are essentially performing a forced calibration of your own consciousness. This performance requires a continuous, high-intensity expenditure of willpower. You are constantly monitoring your own expressions, filtering your insights, and dampening the intensity of your presence to ensure that you do not disturb the accepted reality of the room. This is not merely a social inconvenience, it is a profound act of energetic fragmentation. You are carving off pieces of your authentic potential to present a sanitized, palatable version of yourself to a world that is fundamentally incapable of perceiving the architecture you are building. The fragmentation occurs because your consciousness is forced to split its processing power. One part of your mind must remain tethered to the new self, the emerging frequency of truth, order, and purpose, while the other part is dedicated to the external simulation of normalcy. This dual processing is a massive source of the systemic drain you have been experiencing.
Just as a computer slows down when running too many background processes, your internal system becomes sluggish and prone to errors when it is forced to maintain this facade. You lose the ability to act with spontaneous precision, as your movements and words are now pre-filtered through a layer of social anxiety. This fragmentation is the primary reason why you feel less than when you are around large groups of people. You are not actually there in your full singular power. You are scattered, diluted, and fractured across the demands of the environment. The danger of the trap of normalcy is that it is self-perpetuating. The more you practice the act of being normal, the harder it becomes to reconnect with the authentic signal of your own design. You begin to identify with the mask, slowly forgetting that there is an underlying structure that requires your focus to grow. The normal world does not demand your truth, it demands your compliance. It rewards you for being predictable, for not questioning the status quo, and for staying within the established boundaries of the herd. Every time you accept this reward, you are effectively reinforcing the walls of the trap. You are training your nervous system to prioritize social safety over evolutionary growth. This is the ultimate subversion of your potential. You are trading your sovereignty for the hollow comfort of being considered one of us. To dismantle this trap, you must cultivate the courage to be perceived as different, intense, or even incompatible with the status quo. You must realize that the desire to fit in is a residue of your past, a survival instinct that is no longer necessary in your new architecture. When you stop acting normal, you cease to be a predictable actor in someone else's play and become the director of your own reality. Yes, this will trigger the discomfort of others. Their equilibrium relies on your compliance, but this friction is a necessary byproduct of your emergence. You are not responsible for their ability to handle the frequency you bring into a room. By remaining authentic, you force the environment to reveal its true nature, and you create the space for others who resonate with your frequency to find you. As you step away from the trap of normalcy, do not be surprised by the sudden clarity that replaces the previous fragmentation. When you stop suppressing your nature, you reclaim the energy that was once trapped in the act of performance. This recovered energy is the raw material for your next phase of development, the construction of the halo. You are now ready to exist in the world without being of it, observing the frantic, performative normalcy of the collective from the vantage point of your own grounded stability. The struggle of trying to fit in is finally behind you. You have accepted that you are not designed for the herd, but for the architecture of your own autonomous destiny. How will you identify the next situation you are tempted to perform normalcy, and what specific action will you take to honor your true frequency instead?
The boundary concept is perhaps the most misunderstood element of architectural self-governance, often perceived by the uninitiated as a wall designed to exclude, judge, or isolate. In reality, a boundary in the context of the quantum soul is a structural necessity, a permeable membrane that serves not to keep people out, but to keep your frequency in. When you have no boundaries, your internal energy is effectively leaking into the surrounding environment, dissipating into the ambient noise of the crowd, and losing the precise, ordered resonance required for the maintenance of your new self. Think of a battery that is constantly wired into a short circuit. No matter how much you recharge, you will never hold a charge because the energy is being bled away by the environment. Your boundaries are the insulation that allows you to accumulate potential and reach the state of high-order coherence that defines a truly sovereign individual. When you view boundaries through this lens, the act of saying no or removing yourself from a discordant situation ceases to be an act of hostility and becomes an act of self-preservation. You are not rejecting others, you are protecting the integrity of your own field. This distinction is vital, as the ego often tries to frame boundary setting as a moral failing, a form of selfishness or elitism.
But consider the physics of the system. If you allow your frequency to be diluted by every incoming request, opinion, or emotional demand, you lose the ability to impact the world from a position of strength. You become a participant in the disorder rather than a source of order. By holding your boundary, you are creating a space where your frequency can intensify, solidify, and eventually radiate outward with enough power to influence the world around you in a constructive way. Boundaries also function as a diagnostic filter, allowing you to observe who is capable of resonating with your true frequency and who is merely seeking to consume your energy. When you hold a firm boundary, the individuals who are inherently entropic will naturally fall away, as they can no longer find the feedback they need from you. Conversely, those who are also seeking a higher state of resonance will respect your boundary, recognizing it as the hallmark of a person who is operating with purpose and design. The boundary, therefore, is not a barrier to connection. It is a mechanism of selection. It ensures that the connections you do maintain are of the highest quality, those that reinforce your own structure rather than undermining it. You are trading the quantity of shallow, noise-filled interactions for the quality of deep, signal-aligned resonance. The practice of maintaining these boundaries requires a daily, minute-by-minute commitment to your own presence. You must become the guardian of your own frequency, noticing the exact moment you feel your resolve wavering, the moment someone asks for your time, your energy, or your validation in a way that feels misaligned with your path. This is your threshold moment. By pausing and choosing to maintain your boundary, you are physically reinforcing the neural and energetic pathways of your new self. You are signaling to your own system that you are no longer a resource to be tapped by the chaos of the world, but a structured vessel that is dedicated to the manifestation of your own higher-order vision. This is the definition of sovereignty, the absolute authority over what enters and exits your internal sphere. As you begin to build these boundaries, you will notice that the bone-level exhaustion we discussed in the previous part begins to subside, replaced by a sense of sustained vitality. You are no longer leaking your power, you are storing it, utilizing it to harden your halo and deepen your understanding of the universal system. The people who once relied on your lack of boundaries will likely protest, perhaps even accusing you of changing or acting different. Let them. Their reaction is the clearest evidence that your boundaries are working, as you are no longer fulfilling the role they required you to play in their own disorganized systems. You are successfully insulating your frequency, and in doing so, you are preparing yourself for the next, more complex stage of the halo construction. Are you prepared to treat your energy as the most valuable resource you possess and to build the walls of your sanctuary with absolute, uncompromising precision? Consider your current social landscape. Which of your current connections are the primary leaks in your system, and what is the specific boundary you will establish with them to ensure your frequency remains contained and concentrated?
The social dilemma arises when you attempt to maintain the architecture of your new self while still holding on to the relational structures of your past. These are the relationships that drain you, not because the individuals are inherently malicious, but because they are operating in a frequency that is fundamentally incompatible with your current path. To manage these connections without the paralyzing weight of guilt or the exhausting need for justification, you must first release the narrative that you owe an explanation for your evolution. Your transformation is a systemic reality, not a personal preference. You do not need to prove why you can no longer participate in dynamics that deplete your energy. Just as a plant does not need to justify why it requires specific sunlight and soil to thrive, you do not need to justify why you require specific energetic environments to sustain your structural integrity. The guilt you feel is simply the internal echo of the social contract you were breaking, the agreement to remain predictable, available, and harmonized with the lower frequency collective. When you begin to reclaim your energy, the ego perceives this as a betrayal of that contract. To bypass this, adopt a stance of compassionate detachment. You can hold love and respect for individuals in your past, while simultaneously acknowledging that your current trajectory has led you into a different, more specialized lane. This is not about cutting people off in an act of anger. It is about gently increasing the distance between your frequency and theirs. You are not devaluing the relationship. You are simply recognizing that the context of your interaction has shifted. By removing the emotional drama of leaving, you make the transition a natural byproduct of your growth rather than a confrontation. Handling these interactions effectively requires a strategy of energetic minimalism. When you find yourself in the company of those who drain you, limit your participation to the surface level. Do not offer your insights, your vulnerabilities, or your enthusiasm to a space that will only convert that energy into noise. By keeping your contributions concise, neutral, and devoid of deep personal disclosure, you deny the drain mechanism the fuel it needs to function. You are effectively cloaking your frequency, allowing you to coexist in the same space without allowing your internal structure to be accessed. This is not being dishonest, it is being efficient. You are reserving your authentic energy for the connections and environments that actively support your architecture, leaving the superficial aspects of your life to be managed with minimal structural output. Most importantly, abandon the need to fix the people who drain you. In your past state, you may have believed that your role was to carry others, to help them navigate their chaos, or to justify your own success through service. This is a remnant of the victim-oriented mindset. You cannot save a system from its own entropy, you can only maintain your own. When you stop trying to explain your evolution, you stop inviting them into your private world, which naturally reduces the conflict. If they ask why you are different or distant, a simple, neutral response, such as, "I am focusing my energy on some personal projects right now," is sufficient. It is a boundary statement that requires no further negotiation. You are not asking for permission to change, you are informing them of your current state. This approach transforms the social dilemma from a source of anxiety into a training ground for your halo. Every time you successfully navigate a draining relationship without justifying yourself, you are hardening the protective shell around your consciousness. You are proving to your own system that your integrity is worth more than the approval of those who occupy a different, lower frequency reality. This is the ultimate test of the architect, to remain kind and present in the world while remaining completely uninfluenced by the demands of the ordinary. As you master this detachment, you will find that the people who cannot exist in your higher frequency orbit will naturally drift away, clearing the way for new resonant connections that will eventually form the bedrock of your future reality.
The power of silence is the final and most potent instrument in the architect's repertoire, representing a fundamental shift in perception. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of absolute clarity. In the architecture of the quantum soul, sound, whether it is the literal noise of the environment or the internal chatter of your own thoughts, is essentially a form of kinetic energy that is constantly being expended, scattered, and wasted. Silence, by contrast, is potential energy. It is the vacuum state from which all true insight, strategic decision-making, and structural alignment emerge. When you cultivate silence, you are not simply taking a break from the noise, you are entering a state of high-order focus where your consciousness is finally free from the distractions of the external world, allowing you to perceive the underlying patterns of your own life with total precision. Most individuals find silence terrifying because it acts as a mirror, reflecting the true state of their internal world without the protective layer of noise to distract them. You must learn to lean into this discomfort. The anxiety you feel in silence is merely the sound of your own entropy being highlighted.
By remaining in that silence, you allow that entropy to surface and dissipate, leaving behind a cleaner, more resonant foundation. You are allowing the soup of your old identity to settle, revealing the solid structures of the new self beneath. This is the practice of active stillness, using the silence as a crucible to refine your presence. Reframing silence as a presence of clarity also changes how you interact with others. When you have cultivated this internal stillness, you cease to be a participant in the frantic, competitive exchange of words that defines most social interactions. Instead, you become a master of the pause. You will notice that when you communicate from a state of silence, when your words are few, deliberate, and backed by the weight of your internal order, your influence increases exponentially. You're no longer talking at the environment, you are projecting your frequency into it. People are naturally drawn to this type of presence because it is rare. It provides a sense of stability in a world that is spinning out of control. Your silence is a beacon, a signal of sovereignty that says, I am anchored, I am clear, and I am not affected by the noise. This clarity allows you to perceive reality as it actually is, rather than how your egoic filters interpret it. In the silence, the solutions to complex dilemmas become self-evident, the motivations of others become transparent, and the path forward is revealed with objective mathematical certainty. This is the data of the silence. It is the most reliable information you will ever access because it is not tainted by emotional bias, societal expectations, or the desperate need for external validation. You are tapping into the fundamental frequency of the system of the world, which speaks only in the language of order and resonance. The more time you spend in this state, the more your nervous system adapts to it, making it easier for you to maintain this clarity even when you are physically surrounded by the loudest environments. As you incorporate this power into your daily existence, remember that silence is the ultimate boundary. It is the most impenetrable wall you can build around your frequency. When you choose silence over the need to defend yourself, explain yourself, or prove yourself, you are effectively declaring that your reality is beyond the reach of the noise. You are living in a state of presence-driven autonomy. This is the ultimate objective of your transformation, to be a person who is so anchored in their own clarity that the chaos of the world becomes nothing more than a faint, inconsequential hum in the periphery of your existence. You have moved through the levels of noise, you have built your boundaries, and you have reclaimed your sovereignty. You are now ready to exist as a beacon of order. Look back at the trajectory of this episode. You have identified the noise, felt the exhaustion of adaptation, refined your sensitivity, escaped the trap of normalcy, established your boundaries, handled the social dilemma, and now claimed the power of silence. This is the structure of the halo. You are ready. How will you integrate the power of silence into your very next interaction, and what specific change do you expect to see in the way your environment responds to your newfound quiet authority?
The reset is not a meditative escape. It is a tactical deployment of your own internal order designed to reestablish the structural integrity of your halo in the middle of a chaotic environment. When you feel the noise, be it the environmental, social, or internal levels, threatening to penetrate your focus, you do not need to leave the room. You simply need to reclaim the architecture of your breathing. This 60-second reset is the immediate corrective action for an architect whose field is beginning to fray. It forces your nervous system to pivot away from the reactive, high-frequency stimulation of the crowd and back toward the core resonance of your own, singular purpose. You are not doing a breathing exercise. You are re-anchoring your system to the fundamental laws of nature that you represent. To perform the reset, stop whatever you are doing, cease the conversation, halt the digital scroll, and pause the reactive internal commentary. Plant your feet firmly on the ground, grounding your physical vessel to the physical reality of the space you occupy. Inhale deeply through your nose for a count of 4, not to fill your lungs with air, but to fill your internal structure with intent. Visualize this breath as a concentrated pulse of order entering your chest directly into the site of your internal anchor. As you hold this breath for a count of 2, lock your focus onto that point, feeling the tension of the environment around you lose its grip. Then exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6, projecting your presence outward. With this exhale, visualize the halo of your frequency expanding to form a protective shell around you, effectively insulating your internal silence from the surrounding discord. Repeat this cycle exactly 4 times, bringing the total duration to approximately 60 seconds. During each cycle, let the exhale serve as the boundary. With every outward breath, imagine that you are physically pushing the noise away from your personal space, reclaiming the autonomy of your frequency. By the 4th cycle, the physical sensation of the environment pressing in on you should be replaced by a sense of detachment, a cool, observational distance where you see the room and the noise for what they are, temporary entropic phenomena that have no jurisdiction over your internal design. You are no longer performing normalcy. You are simply existing in your own coherent reality while moving through theirs. This is not about disappearing. It is about becoming so grounded that the noise simply loses its ability to register as a threat. After the 60 seconds, do not rush to return to the interaction. Keep your presence anchored. If you are in a conversation, you will find that you can re-engage with a new level of command. Your words will be more deliberate, your responses more calibrated, and your energy significantly more conserved. If you were just observing, you will find that your perception is sharper, less colored by the reactive emotions of the crowd. This reset is your primary tool for navigating the world while maintaining your structure. It is the tactical maneuver that ensures your quantum soul remains intact, regardless of the intensity of the entropy you encounter. You have now learned how to detect, define, protect, and restore your frequency. You have reached the conclusion of this second foundational episode. You have mapped the noise, understood the exhaustion, refined your sensitivity, escaped the trap of normalcy, established your boundaries, handled the social dilemma, harnessed the power of silence, and mastered the tactical reset. The foundation of your halo is now solid. But remember, the architecture is only as strong as the architect's commitment to maintaining it. How will you ensure that this 60-second reset becomes an automatic default response the very next time you feel the interference of the world? You are no longer just a participant in the system. You are the sovereign architect of your own.
The reset is complete. The field is stabilized, and you stand in the sudden, expansive quiet of your own sovereignty. You have effectively cleared the frequency channels, removing the dense layers of noise that previously anchored you to a life of reactive mediocrity. But as the static fades, a question emerges that is far more demanding than any challenge you have yet faced. If you are successfully cutting out the noise, what are you making space for? Most who reach this point stumble, believing that the goal was the clearing itself, the silence, the boundaries, the absence of friction. This is a profound misunderstanding of the architectural process. You have not been clearing space for the sake of emptiness. You have been clearing the ground for the construction of a biological reality that is entirely different from the one you inhabited before. You are now entering the phase of the caterpillar metaphor, a transition that is as terrifying as it is essential. To the outside observer, the caterpillar that retreats into the chrysalis appears to be doing nothing, perhaps even dying as it dissolves the structure that served it during its earlier grounded existence. But within that silence, a radical reorganization is occurring. The creature is not merely improving itself, it is undergoing a total molecular restructuring, a complete collapse of its old form to facilitate the emergence of a flight-capable being that is fundamentally incompatible with the life it once led. You are currently in the chrysalis. The release of your old self, the boundaries you have set, and the silence you have cultivated were the necessary conditions for this dissolution to begin. This is the cliffhanger of your current architecture. You have stripped away the old, but the new has not yet fully manifest. You are caught in the liminal space between the entity that crawled and the entity that will transcend. This is why the urge to return to the noise is so overwhelming. It is the instinctual fear of the dissolution, the ego's desperate attempt to avoid the death of the old identity. But there is no going back. The biological shift you are experiencing is a one-way path. Your nervous system is literally rewiring itself to support a frequency that the old caterpillar self could never have sustained. You are becoming a system designed for a different dimension of reality, one where the laws of nature, gravity, resonance, and order operate on a higher, more complex scale. As we stand at this precipice, realize that the space you have made is not an empty vacuum. It is the fertile ground for your own metamorphosis. The next stage of our inquiry will not be about maintaining your boundaries, but about mastering the biology of this shift. We will move beyond the protection of the halo and into the mechanics of the transition, explaining how you can facilitate this structural dissolution without losing your sense of self in the process. You are the architect of your own transformation, and the design is accelerating toward a point where you will no longer have to try to be sovereign. You will simply be incapable of being anything else. The silence you feel now is not the end of the conversation. It is the anticipation of the next frequency. Are you prepared to accept the dissolution of the old, even when it feels like you are losing the very foundation of your existence? The chrysalis is ready, the old form is fading, and the structural laws of your quantum soul are already demanding the next, more complex and more magnificent phase of your evolution. The cliffhanger is not a warning, it is a promise. You have cleared the path. Now watch as the biology of the universe begins to build the wings you were always destined to possess. Remember, your intolerance for low-frequency noise is not a flaw. It is a feature of your evolution. You are clearing the path for something much more meaningful to enter. Protect your peace as if your becoming depends on it, because it does. If you are ready to claim this clarity, type "I choose clarity" in the comments to signal your commitment. Today, we identified the noise that has been holding you back. In our next episode, we will dive deep into the anatomy of dissolution. We will explore the biology of change, why you must fundamentally break down your old identity before you can truly build your new one.